The sun rose over the quiet valley, painting the world in golden light, and, for the first time, the herders did not follow their animals to new pastures. They stayed. After years of wandering through mountains, rivers, and endless plains, the people realized that they didn't need to keep chasing the horizon. The land around them had everything they needed: grass for their animals, fresh water for their families, and rich soil that whispered a promise. So they decided to stop moving, just for a while, to see what would happen. At first, they built simple shelters from wood and grass, small enough to take apart if they changed their minds. But then days turned into weeks and weeks into months, and the people began to feel something new, a sense of belonging. Each sunrise greeted them from the same hill. Each evening, the same stars appeared above the same stream. Children began to name the trees and rocks nearby as if they were old friends. The herders watched their animals graze peacefully and thought, maybe this place is home. So they built better houses, with stones stacked carefully, with clay packed into the cracks, with roofs made of straw and reeds to keep out the rain. They planted seeds near their homes, little gardens of hope that soon sprouted into patches of green. The smell of earth after rain became the scent of happiness. The men built walls from stone to protect the village from the wind. The women shaped pots from clay to store food and water. The children ran between huts, laughing and chasing chickens that somehow always escaped. At night, smoke from cooking fires curled up toward the stars, carrying the scent of roasted grain and goat milk. Villages were more than just shelters. They were living hearts made of laughter, warmth, and shared dreams. No one could remember who first suggested building close together, but soon houses stood side by side, forming little rows like families holding hands. Paths began to form between doors, and those paths turned into streets. People greeted each other every morning, shared news, shared food, and shared work. Life was no longer about survival alone. It was about community. When one roof leaked, everyone helped repair it. When a child was born, everyone celebrated. When a storm came, they gathered inside the largest hut, holding hands and waiting together until it passed. Togetherness became their greatest invention. The elders sat by the fires and told stories of the old wandering days, of frozen rivers, endless plains, and how they once followed herds instead of seasons. The children listened, their eyes wide, unable to imagine a world without homes or neighbors. Now they had gardens to water, animals to feed, and paths to sweep clean every morning. They were no longer wanderers, they were villagers. The rhythm of life changed too. Morning began with roosters crowing, dogs barking, and the smell of bread cooking on flat stones. Men went out to the fields to tend the crops, while women ground grains into flour or shaped clay pots under the shade of trees. Children fetched water from the stream and sang songs as they worked, their laughter echoing through the valley. Every task had meaning, and every person had a place. When evening came, the village glowed in the orange light of many fires. Families gathered to share meals and stories of the day. The sound of flutes and drums filled the air, made from reeds and hollow bones. People danced around the fires, their shadows leaping against the walls, celebrating not a hunt or a victory, but life itself. One night, as the flames flickered, an elder stood up and said, "We are no longer chasing the earth. The earth has come to live with us," and everyone nodded because it felt true. They began to give their village a name so others would know where they lived. Naming a place made it feel alive, as if the land itself had become part of the family. Visitors came from other valleys, following the smell of cooking fires or the sound of drums. They brought gifts, salt, stones, and stories, and sometimes they stayed. The village grew, slowly but surely, with new huts appearing like mushrooms after rain. Soon, there were paths leading to a well, a meeting circle, and a place where children played. The first leaders were chosen not for strength, but for wisdom. They helped settle arguments, planned harvests, and decided where to build new homes. These early meetings were the first sparks of government, small councils of elders, and families working together. The village also began to protect itself. Walls of stone or wooden fences were built to keep wild animals and thieves away. Torches burned at night, glowing like stars on the ground. Dogs patrolled the edges, their barks echoing in the darkness. Inside those walls, people slept in peace. The concept of home became sacred. Home was no longer just a shelter, it was safety, memory, and love woven together. Each family took pride in their home, decorating walls with painted hands and simple symbols, spirals, suns, and lines that told their family's story. It was the first kind of art made for a home, not for a cave. The people felt connected not just by blood, but by the land beneath their feet. They began to understand that when they cared for the earth, it cared for them. So they learned to share water fairly, to rest the soil after harvest, to plant trees near the riverbanks. From these lessons came the first whispers of farming knowledge, the understanding that humans could shape nature gently instead of fighting it. Seasons became teachers, and the village became a classroom without walls. When children asked why the sun and moon took turns in the sky, elders told them stories that mixed truth with wonder. Myths began to grow about spirits of rain, wind, and fire who blessed or cursed the harvest. Each story carried both wisdom and warning. The people learned that life in one place came with responsibility. If they took too much from the land, it stopped giving. So they learned balance, the most important lesson of all. And as the stars returned each night, shining over the same roofs and fields, the villagers realized they had built more than homes. They had built something timeless, a sense of belonging, a rhythm of togetherness, and the heartbeat of civilization itself. The first villages had no kings or monuments, but they held something far greater, the beginning of human community. The years passed quietly, and the once small clusters of huts began to grow into something greater than anyone had imagined. Children who had been born in the first huts were now adults, building homes of their own beside their parents. The village was alive with sound, the clatter of clay pots, the laughter of children, the low hum of work and song blending together. What had started as a simple camp of herders had turned into a living, breathing community. Everywhere you looked, there was motion, people grinding grain between stones, shaping baskets from reeds, patching roofs, feeding animals, or tending to gardens that now stretched far beyond the village walls. Each person had a role to play, and that role gave them purpose. There were the farmers, who studied the soil like it was a secret language. They knew when to plant seeds and when to rest the land. There were the builders, whose hands were strong from stacking stone upon stone, shaping walls that could stand against storms. And there were the potters, artists who shaped wet clay into bowls and jars that told the story of daily life in their patterns. Some began to trade their creations with visitors from other valleys, and with each exchange, knowledge flowed like a river. The world was beginning to connect in ways no one could yet understand. With every passing season, the people learned more about working together. They shared tools, ideas, and celebrations. The first festivals were born, gatherings of song, dance, and gratitude after a good harvest. Villagers would light fires that glowed against the dark hills, drums would beat in rhythm with hearts, and laughter would rise into the night sky. These moments reminded them that even though they were many families, they were one people. They began to notice patterns in the world, how the moon grew and shrank, how the sun marked the days and the seasons. Elders placed stones to track the shadows, and before long, people were measuring time itself. The first calendars were not written on paper but marked in memory and rhythm, plant when the shadows shorten, harvest when the air turns cool. Knowledge, once scattered, was now being shared and remembered. Fire circles became classrooms. Children learned from watching their parents' hands how to shape clay, how to grind grain, how to weave reeds into mats. Everyday life became a school where every task was a lesson. In the evenings, stories filled the air. The elders spoke of how their grandparents once followed the stars and herds. They reminded everyone to be grateful for the stillness of village life. Some tales were filled with mystery, spirits who guarded the fields, ancestors who walked through dreams, and gods of sun and rain who watched from the mountains. These stories shaped the first beliefs, simple, powerful, born from awe and gratitude. When lightning struck the hills, people no longer only feared it, they saw it as the voice of the sky. When the river flooded, they thanked it for feeding their fields. This respect became the seed of religion, not built on temples yet, but on wonder. As belief deepened, people began to create small shrines near their homes, piles of stones, carved wooden figures, or painted symbols that represented nature's spirits. Every morning, they offered food or flowers, whispering thanks for rain, sun, and life itself. And through these rituals, the villagers felt even more connected, not only to each other, but to the world around them. Seasons passed, and the villages grew denser. Paths turned into lanes, lanes into gathering squares. A meeting place stood at the center, where elders discussed the needs of the people, when to dig new wells, how to share food during dry seasons, and what to do when strangers arrived. Rules were made, not to control, but to keep peace. These were the first laws, spoken and remembered, passed from mouth to mouth around the fires. Leaders emerged, not as kings, but as guides trusted for their wisdom. They didn't rule with force, but with fairness, settling arguments and reminding everyone that unity made them strong. Villages also became places of invention. People learned to store grain in clay jars and build granaries on stilts to keep rats away. They discovered that dried herbs could heal wounds and cure sickness. Some experimented with new materials, polishing stones into tools sharper than ever before. Innovation had begun, born not from survival, but from curiosity. Trade brought more change. Travelers arrived with new colors, new seeds, and strange stories from faraway lands. In exchange, they carried pottery, grain, or woven mats from the village. Every trade was more than an exchange of goods, it was an exchange of ideas. And so knowledge spread from one valley to another like ripples in water. The villagers started to think beyond their walls. They sent scouts to explore nearby rivers and forests, mapping the land in their minds. Some found other villages, distant cousins who spoke different words but shared the same hopes. They began to form alliances, promises to help one another in times of flood or hunger. For the first time, humanity was building not just homes, but networks. With peace and prosperity came beauty. Walls were decorated with painted patterns, bright with colors made from crushed berries and clay. People adorned themselves with beads, feathers, and shells, small tokens that spoke of joy and belonging. Music grew more complex, too. Flutes made from bone played alongside drums made from stretched hide. Songs of love, work, and harvest echoed through the valley, weaving sound into memory. Children danced barefoot in the dust while elders clapped and smiled. Every movement was a celebration of life itself. In time, the people began to think about what came after them. They buried their dead carefully with gifts of tools or beads, believing the spirit continued elsewhere. These were the first steps toward a deeper understanding of existence, the idea that life was part of something eternal. And as these beliefs grew, so did the village's heart. The people began to dream of the future, of larger homes, stronger walls, and places where everyone could gather to give thanks. They began to build with purpose. The first communal buildings rose, large halls for meetings, granaries for food, and open courtyards for festivals. Some even carved symbols into stones at the village edge, marking their land as sacred ground. Under the stars, fires burned brighter than ever before. People could now see their world stretching further than their ancestors ever imagined. The mountains, the rivers, the fields, all were connected by the footsteps of villagers who no longer wandered aimlessly, but built their future one brick at a time. Children were born who would never know the life of hunters and gatherers. To them, the world had always been a place of neighbors, paths, and laughter. They grew up watching the seasons turn like pages in a storybook, learning that every year was another chapter in the story of humankind. And though they did not know it, their simple homes and humble lives would one day grow into cities, temples, and empires. But for now, they were content, surrounded by family, bound by shared labor, and guided by the steady rhythm of daily life. The dawn of civilization had begun, not with kings or wars, but with kindness, cooperation, and the courage to stay in one place. As night fell, the village glowed under the moon, peaceful and alive. Dogs barked softly, children slept, and fires burned low. The wind whispered through the huts, carrying the scent of earth, smoke, and dreams. And somewhere in that quiet harmony, humanity found its truest home.